We explored the most dangerous abandoned cities on Earth. Have you ever imagined walking through a city where every breath could be your last? For thousands of years, humans have built thriving communities in every corner of our planet. But with progress and industry come hidden dangers that can transform bustling cities into toxic ghost towns overnight. Some places become so contaminated with radiation, asbestos, or chemical poisons that they remain uninhabitable for decades, or even centuries. Today, we're taking you inside the world's most dangerous abandoned cities, where the ground beneath your feet could kill you, where invisible toxins fill the air, and where entire populations were forced to flee, leaving behind everything they knew. From nuclear disasters to underground fires that have burned for over 60 years, these places represent humanity's darkest environmental mistakes. Join us as we reveal the most dangerous abandoned cities on Earth. Places so toxic, they make horror movies look like fairy tales. The nuclear ghost city. What if I told you there's a city where radiation levels are still 10 times higher than normal, nearly 40 years after everyone fled? It's called Pripyat, and it's located just 3 kilometers from the infamous Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine. Back in 1986, this was a thriving Soviet city, built specifically to house the plant's workers and their families. In fact, Pripyat was one of the most modern cities in the Soviet Union, complete with an amusement park, schools, hospitals, and everything a community of 49,360 people could need. But on April 26, 1986, Reactor 4 exploded in the worst nuclear disaster in human history. The explosion released 400 times more radiation than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Within 36 hours, every single resident was evacuated with just the clothes on their backs, told they'd return in a few days. That was nearly 40 years ago, and Pripyat remains a radioactive wasteland. The contamination zone spans 2,600 square kilometers. That's larger than Luxembourg, making it one of the largest exclusion zones in the world. For the thousands of families who once called this place home, their entire lives, photo albums, toys, furniture, memories, remain frozen in time, slowly decaying in one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Look at this: abandoned Ferris wheels, empty schools with children's gas masks still scattered on classroom floors, and trees growing through apartment buildings. You can see nature slowly reclaiming what was once a symbol of Soviet progress. But the invisible threat of radiation makes every step potentially deadly. Would you risk your life to walk through these radioactive ruins? The town that's been burning for 62 years. How in the world did an entire town catch fire underground and keep burning for over 6 decades? It's called Centralia, Pennsylvania, and beneath this seemingly quiet town lies an inferno that has been raging since 1962. What started as a simple trash fire at the town dump accidentally ignited a vein of anthracite coal running beneath the community. That was 62 years ago, and the fire is still burning today. The underground blaze now extends 8 miles in length and covers 3,700 acres underground, burning at depths of up to 300 feet below the surface. At its current rate, scientists estimate it could continue burning for another 250 years, making it one of the longest burning fires in human history. In fact, the ground temperature in some areas reaches 175 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt the soles of your shoes. Carbon monoxide and other toxic gases constantly seep through cracks in the earth, creating invisible death traps that can appear anywhere, anytime. For the 1,000 residents who once lived here, walking outside became a game of Russian roulette with poisonous fumes. By 1984, the federal government declared the town uninhabitable and offered to relocate every resident. The Postal Service even revoked Centralia's zip code in 2002, officially erasing it from the map. Look at this. Smoke still rises from cracks in the abandoned highways, creating an apocalyptic landscape that inspired the horror video game Silent Hill. Despite the dangers, a handful of stubborn residents refuse to leave and still call this toxic wasteland home. Australia's asbestos death town. Have you ever imagined a place so contaminated that it's literally called the largest contamination zone in the southern hemisphere? Back in the 1940s, Wittenoom was a booming mining town in Western Australia's remote Pilbara region, home to 20,000 people who worked in what was then the world's largest blue asbestos mine. For 20 years, the Colonial Sugar Refining Company extracted millions of tons of the deadly mineral, with workers and their families unknowingly breathing in microscopic fibers that would later prove to be one of the most lethal substances known to humanity. It's 120 kilometers north of Perth and was once the center of a prosperous dangerous mining industry. But today, it stands as Australia's most notorious toxic ghost town. The mine produced 161,000 tons of blue asbestos between 1943 and 1966, spreading deadly fibers throughout the town and surrounding environment. In fact, more than 2,000 deaths have been directly linked to the asbestos exposure in Wittenoom. That's 10% of everyone who ever lived or worked there, making it one of the deadliest industrial disasters in Australian history. The contamination is so severe that wind continues to blow asbestos fibers across the landscape, creating invisible clouds of death that can cause mesothelioma and lung cancer decades after exposure. For anyone who visits today, just one breath of contaminated air could sentence them to a slow, painful death 20 to 40 years in the future. Look at this: abandoned mine shafts, contaminated tailings piles stretching for miles, and warning signs that declare the entire area off-limits to human habitation. Western Australian government has officially closed the town and is working to erase it completely from existence. If you're enjoying these incredible but terrifying places, make sure to subscribe for more shocking discoveries about our world's most dangerous locations, the Dioxin Disaster Town. What's this toxic chemical doing scattered across an entire American town's roads and soil? It's called Times Beach, Missouri, and in 1982, this small community of 2,000 people discovered they had been living on one of the most contaminated pieces of land in United States history. Back in the 1970s, a waste hauler named Russell Bliss was paid to spray oil on the town's unpaved roads to keep dust down during the summer months. What nobody knew was that his oil contained massive amounts of dioxin, a chemical so toxic that just 1 part per billion is considered dangerous. The contamination levels in Times Beach measured 100 parts per billion, 100 times the EPA's safety limit. In fact, dioxin is the same deadly chemical found in Agent Orange, the defoliant used during the Vietnam War that caused cancer and birth defects in thousands of veterans and Vietnamese civilians. When catastrophic flooding in 1982 spread the contaminated soil throughout the entire town, the EPA made an unprecedented decision. They would buy out every single resident and level the entire community. The federal government spent $36 million to relocate all 2,000 residents, making Times Beach the largest residential buyout in American history at that time. For the families who lived here, Christmas of 1982 became the day they learned their entire town was a toxic waste site. Look at this: government workers in hazmat suits testing soil, families packing their belongings under military supervision, and an entire community disappearing from the map forever. Today, Times Beach is gone, replaced by Route 66 State Park, but the contaminated soil required incineration at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit to destroy the deadly dioxin. Can you imagine being told your entire neighborhood is too poisonous for human life? America's most toxic ghost town. How in the world did a thriving mining community become so polluted that children's blood contained dangerous levels of lead? Back in the early 1900s, Pecha, Oklahoma was known as the world's richest lead and zinc mining district. For over 70 years, this boom town of 20,000 people extracted millions of tons of precious metals from the earth, powering America's industrial growth and providing materials for both world wars. It's located in the heart of what was called the Tri-State Mining District, covering parts of Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri. The mines here produced over $20 billion worth of lead and zinc, making it one of the most productive mining regions in world history. But the mining left behind 300 million tons of toxic waste called chat, contaminated rock piles that towered over the town like artificial mountains. These chat piles contained dangerous levels of lead, zinc, and cadmium that gradually contaminated the soil, water, and air. In fact, by the 1990s, children in Pecha had blood lead levels 3 times higher than the national average, causing learning disabilities, behavioral problems, and permanent brain damage. What makes this even more terrifying is that the extensive mining created a network of underground tunnels and caverns that made the entire town unstable. Sinkholes began appearing without warning, swallowing homes and threatening to collapse the ground beneath people's feet. For the 1,640 residents who called Pecha home in 2006, the government offered a devastating choice: take a buyout and leave forever, or stay and risk their children's futures. Look at this: massive chat piles stretching to the horizon, abandoned homes with "keep out" signs, and contaminated streams that run orange with toxic runoff. The EPA classified Pecha as one of the most toxic places in America, and in 2009, the town was officially dissolved. The chemical valley of death. What if I told you there's a place in Italy where cancer rates are 3 times higher than normal because of toxic chemical contamination? It's called Porto Marghera, and it was once Italy's largest industrial industrial complex built on the edge of the beautiful Venice Lagoon. Back in the 1920s, this artificial island was created to house chemical plants, oil refineries, and aluminum smelters that would power Italy's industrial revolution. For decades, 30,000 workers commuted daily to this massive complex that produced everything from plastics to pesticides. The industrial zone covers 2,000 hectares and once employed nearly 1/3 of Venice's workforce. But 70 years of unregulated chemical production turned this industrial paradise into an environmental nightmare. The contamination is so severe that the soil contains dangerous levels of dioxins, heavy metals, and carcinogenic chemicals that have seeped into the groundwater and air. In fact, studies show that workers at Porto Marghera had cancer rates 31% higher than the Italian average, with lung cancer rates nearly double the national norm. Between 1970 and 2000, over 150 workers died from exposure to vinyl chloride alone, a chemical used in plastic production that causes liver cancer. What makes this tragedy even worse is that the contamination has spread beyond the industrial zone into the famous Venice Lagoon, threatening one of the world's most treasured UNESCO World Heritage Sites. For the communities surrounding Porto Marghera, living in the shadow of these chemical plants meant breathing toxic air and drinking contaminated water for generations. Look at this: abandoned chemical plants with rusting storage tanks, contaminated canals flowing toward Venice's historic center, and warning signs marking areas too dangerous for human contact. Despite cleanup efforts costing billions of euros, much of Porto Marghera remains too toxic for safe redevelopment. How is it possible that one of the world's most beautiful cities sits next to one of Europe's most contaminated industrial sites? Which of these toxic ghost towns shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that like button if you're learning something incredible. The uranium mining wasteland. Have you ever imagined a town where radioactive dust covers everything and children play on contaminated playground equipment? Back in the 1950s, Melusu in Kyrgyzstan was a secret Soviet uranium mining town that supplied nuclear material for the USSR's atomic weapons program. For 13 years, this remote mountain community of 25,000 people extracted uranium ore that would fuel the Cold War arms race, with workers and residents completely unaware of the deadly radiation surrounding them. It's located in the Fergana Valley, 150 kilometers southeast of the capital Bishkek. The Soviet mining operation left behind 36 different waste sites containing 1.96 million cubic meters of radioactive tailings. That's enough contaminated material to fill nearly 800 Olympic-sized swimming pools, making it one of the most radioactive places in Central Asia. In fact, the uranium tailings contain radium-226, thorium-230, and other radioactive isotopes with half-lives of thousands of years. The contamination levels are so high that some areas register radiation doses 20 times above safe limits. What makes this situation even more dangerous is that the waste sites are located in a seismically active region prone to earthquakes and landslides. For the 23,000 people who still live in Melusu today, daily life means constant exposure to invisible radiation that increases cancer risk and causes birth defects. Children walk to school past radioactive waste dumps, and families grow vegetables in contaminated soil because they have no other choice. Look at this: cracked concrete barriers containing radioactive waste, contaminated rivers flowing toward populated areas, and Soviet-era warning signs that have faded beyond recognition. The World Bank has identified Melusu as one of the 10 most polluted places on Earth, but cleanup efforts remain stalled due to political instability and lack of funding. Despite the dangers, thousands of people continue to call this radioactive wasteland home. The abandoned smelting hell. What's this massive toxic cloud doing hanging over an entire Russian city? It's called Karabakh, and for over 100 years this Ural mountain city has been home to one of the world's largest copper smelters. The Karabakh copper smelter, built in 1910, processed millions of tons of copper ore with absolutely no environmental controls, spewing sulfur dioxide, heavy metals and toxic particles into the air 24 hours a day. The environmental devastation is so complete that NASA uses satellite images of Karabakh to train astronauts to recognize ecological disaster zones from space. The smelter's emissions have killed all vegetation within a 30-kilometer radius, creating a Martian-like landscape of red barren hills that locals call the Martian surface. It's 90 kilometers northwest of Chelyabinsk and was once surrounded by lush Siberian forests. But decades of acid rain and toxic fallout have turned the area into one of the most polluted places on Earth. The air pollution is so severe that respiratory diseases affect 90% of children living in the area, and life expectancy is 10 years lower than the Russian average. In fact, the soil contamination levels are 600 times higher than safe limits for copper, 120 times higher for zinc, and 50 times higher for lead. The Mias River, which flows through the city, is so acidic and contaminated that it's classified as a Class 5 toxic waste site, the highest contamination level possible. For the 12,000 residents who still call Karabakh home, every breath contains dangerous levels of sulfur dioxide and metal particles. Look at this. Hills stripped completely bare of vegetation, orange-colored rivers running with toxic runoff, and an apocalyptic landscape that looks like another planet. Even though the smelter has implemented some environmental controls, the decades of contamination mean Karabakh will remain one of Earth's most toxic cities for generations to come. The poisoned mining capital. How in the world did a city built on gold become one of the most polluted places in Africa? Back in 1886, Johannesburg, South Africa was founded on the discovery of the world's largest gold deposits. But in the township of Soweto, decades of gold mining left behind a toxic legacy that continues to poison residents today. The Witwatersrand gold mines produced over 40% of all gold ever mined in human history, but the mining process used cyanide and other deadly chemicals that contaminated enormous areas. The mining operations created over 600 mine dumps containing 6 billion tons of contaminated waste spread across 400 square kilometers. These tailings contain dangerous levels of uranium, arsenic, mercury, and cyanide that continue to leach into groundwater and blow through the air as toxic dust. It's located in Gauteng province and was once the world's largest gold-producing region. But the environmental cost has been catastrophic. Studies show that residents living near mine dumps have uranium levels in their urine 4 times higher than safe limits, and dust storms regularly cover communities with radioactive particles. In fact, the acid mine drainage from abandoned shafts has contaminated groundwater across an area larger than 1,000 square kilometers. The contaminated water is so acidic that it can burn skin on contact and contains heavy metal concentrations hundreds of times above safe drinking water standards. For the 4 million people living in Greater Johannesburg, the legacy of gold mining means breathing contaminated air and living on poisoned land. Children play on mine dumps that glow yellow with sulfur compounds, and families unknowingly build homes on some of the most toxic soil on the continent. Look at this. Massive yellow mine dumps towering over townships, contaminated streams flowing through residential areas, and warning signs marking radioactive waste sites in the middle of urban community. Despite generating trillions of dollars in wealth, the gold mines left behind a toxic wasteland that will threaten human health for thousands of years. The Industrial Poison Valley. What if I told you there's a valley in China where pollution levels are so extreme that it's known as Cancer Village? It's called Linfen, located in China's Shaanxi province, and for decades it held the notorious title of the world's most polluted city. This industrial center is home to massive coal mining operations, steel mills, and chemical plants that have turned the air, water, and soil into a toxic cocktail of dangerous pollutants. The city sits in a valley surrounded by mountains, which traps pollution like a giant bowl. Coal production in the region reaches 1 billion tons annually. That's 1/4 of China's total coal output. The air pollution is so severe that visibility is often reduced to just a few hundred meters, and residents say they can taste the metal particles in the air. It's home to 4.5 million people who live in what environmental scientists call an apocalyptic hellscape. The particulate matter in the air regularly reaches levels 20 times higher than World Health Organization safety standards. In fact, simply breathing the air in Linfen for one day is equivalent to smoking 3 packs of cigarettes. The contamination has poisoned the region's water supply, with heavy metals and industrial chemicals making tap water unsafe to drink. Cancer rates in surrounding villages are 10 times higher than the national average, and birth defects occur at alarming frequencies due to toxic exposure. For the millions of people who call this region home, daily life means breathing air thick with coal dust, drinking bottled water because local sources are poisoned, and watching their children develop respiratory diseases before they learn to walk. Look at this. Industrial facilities belching black smoke that blocks out the sun, rivers running red and orange with chemical runoff, and residents wearing face masks just to walk outside their homes. Despite government cleanup efforts costing billions of dollars, Linfen remains one of the most toxic urban environments on Earth. Can you imagine raising a family in a place where the air itself is slowly killing everyone who breathes it? From radioactive ghost cities to underground fires that have burned for over 60 years, these dangerous abandoned places remind us of the devastating environmental costs of human progress. Each of these toxic wastelands tells the story of communities that thrived until industrial disasters, chemical contamination, or radioactive accidents forced entire populations to flee their homes forever. What's truly shocking is that many of these environmental disasters were preventable, whether it was the lack of safety protocols at Chernobyl, unregulated industrial dumping, or simply ignoring the health warnings about asbestos and radiation. These tragedies represent some of humanity's worst decision-making. But these abandoned places also show us nature's incredible resilience. In Pripyat, wildlife has returned to the exclusion zone, creating an accidental nature preserve. In other contaminated areas, scientists are developing new technologies to clean up toxic soil and groundwater, giving hope that these poisoned landscapes might someday be safe again. The lesson from these dangerous abandoned cities is clear. The environment doesn't belong to us, we belong to it. When we poison the air, water, and soil, we're ultimately poisoning ourselves and future generations. Which of these toxic ghost towns surprised you the most? Have you ever visited an abandoned place that felt dangerous? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to explore more of our world's most extreme and fascinating places, check out our video about the deepest places humans have ever explored, or our documentary about cities that exist in the most impossible locations on Earth. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible content that will change how you see our world. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.